one that can do some pretty impactful stuff as well. The setup on the Volcarona, the acrobatics, Grassy Seed, Terra Stella on the Sneasler, that could be really cool as well.
Well, we are jumping into this game one here in round 3 in Dortmund. It is going to be Flavio leading out with the Rillaboom and the King Gambit. And we're going to see Antonio lead off with that double dragon pair of Garchomp and the Dragonite.
Yeah, double dragon coming back in full force here. Hasn't been around for a while. I think it's like Black and White was the double dragon era, but here they are again. Garchomp. Its Earthquake is going to be weakened here, so it might need to be forced into Stomping Tantrum if it wants to hit that King Gambit super effectively, because of course in the grassy terrain, Earthquake will be halved. But Dragonite also has access to Low Kick, so it's going to be able to threaten some really good damage into the King Gambit as well. Or it could just go for its Terra Blast immediately to be able to one-hit knock out that opposing Rillaboom. It is multi-scale here though, so it is open to a fake out. That might be why it's switching into the Ninetales.
Yeah, we are going to see it just retreat for later on as that Alolan Ninetales comes to the field and starts the snow with that snow warning ability. Going to give a defense boost, of course, to the ice types on the field. Your Alolan Ninetales being the only one. It is going to be able to take attacks from the opposite side a little bit better this turn. Diving in with our first Terastallization as well. It is going to be the King Gambit on Flavio's side going to that solo Dark Terra type here, and the fake out followed up from the Rillaboom coming into the Ninetales, but not going to prevent or flinch it this turn as a Stomping Tantrum taken very well from that King Gambit.
Yeah, very nicely done. And there is that Swords Dance coming out from the King Gambit. But really nice switch in for the Ninetales here, because now you can go for an Encore into that King Gambit and you can lock it down into that Swords Dance. That might force it into the Sucker Punch this turn. And then if you just don't go for an attacking move, then that Sucker Punch becomes useless as well.
Yeah, and you could almost switch out the Garchomp if you want in this situation into something more preferable in the back to not have to, because Garchomp will be forced into protection if it doesn't go for an attack, so may get a little bit more of an advantage position if you switch in something like we may see Antonio go for here. And this puts Flavio in a really awkward position where do you keep the King Gambit on the field or do you try and get a switch yourself to kind of get around that Encore threat that's coming out?
Yeah, you can see what he's going for with the Terra Dark there, because the Stomping Tantrum really didn't do as much damage, and it's not going to do any damage from the Garchomp this time. It is switching into that King Gambit to try and avoid that Sucker Punch that could be coming out into that slot. Of course, if that was the move that was chosen, it will fail, but then you could just go for the Encore into the Swords Dance if it wasn't a Sucker Punch. That's probably why the Rillaboom has now switched into that Clefable, and the King Gambit on Flavio's side is going for that Protect. So if that is going to be an Encore, which it does look like Antonio went for into that King Gambit's Protect, now you can go for a Follow Me, and you keep those +2 boosts on the King Gambit.
Yeah, and it's definitely one way to get around that threat of the Encore, bringing your Redirector onto the field, because now you can draw that in with your Clefable, free up your own King Gambit to get the damage that you need off onto the opposite side of the field. Of course, having a way to hit that Ninetales, get rid of it as quick as possible is probably going to be the key here, but you can't forget about the King Gambit. Kind of Antonio identifying that maybe that Redirector does come in for that support to get around the Encore, and why the King Gambit's coming onto the field to really threaten that opposing Clefable. And now the Terastallization taken up by the King Gambit on Flavio's side of the field. The Clefable's not going to be able to go for that Steel Terra type to get around some of those threats from Antonio's King Gambit, as we see the Clefable just switch out, not want to use that redirection, just using it as a bit of a decoy.
And there is that Dondozo joining the field. Excellent Pokemon to bring to this game. Blizzard coming out here. Could have been another Encore into that King Gambit, but no. Smartly going for the Blizzard, expecting the Clefable to switch out there. Ironhead follow-up into the King Gambit, putting it down into the red, but here is a +2 Kowtow Cleave. Absolutely massive damage into that Ninetales, but thanks to the snow being up, that defense boost keeping it on the field.
Probably in that Sucker Punch range now, the Ninetales, you would say, especially with that Terastallization boost, so you have to be careful if you are Antonio. Of course, you can get around that with the Encore, but what do you Encore this turn? Do you Encore the Kowtow Cleave, or do you just utilize your own King Gambit now to try and remove it from the field? Of course, Flavio being able to position that Dondozo on the field now, it is going to be threatened by that Freeze Dry, but of course it does have those options where it can click into, for sure, or Yawn and start disrupting things on Antonio's side of the field and breaking the flow that Antonio's seeming to get into.
Yeah, if that Ninetales is taken care of, it doesn't really seem like Antonio has an easy way to break through that Dondozo. That's probably why the Ninetales is protecting itself here, to keep it safe from any Sucker Punches that comes out. And yes, Flavio did go for that Sucker Punch into the opposing Ninetales. King Gambit on Antonio's side of the field is now able to follow up with an Ironhead into that Terra Dark King Gambit, able to pick pick up the knockout, so no more Sucker Punch available on the Ninetales here, but Dondozo has been left alone to go for that curse and start setting itself up.
Yeah, the curse has already started, dropping that speed, +1 to the attack and the defense stat on this Dondozo. Going to be able to take those physical attacks from the Garchomp, from the Dragonite that's in the back, and what is out on the field now in that King Gambit. Not so much the Ninetales, but it is pretty threatened and it is very low health. Of course, when you bring in something like this Rillaboom now from Flavio's side of the field, going to have that fake out. It has just protected, so it is going to be susceptible to that fake out, and also the Grassy Glide will probably be in range to take that down. So the Ninetales not in a great position. Do we say Antonio just that? Potentially bring something else in to better deal with the threats out on the field from Flavio's side.
Yeah, you could switch in the Garchomp to get some extra rough skin damage onto the opposing Rillaboom, whether it goes for a fake out or a Grassy Glide. It's going to be really close if that Ninetales in range of Grassy Glide. It would be in range of a fake out into a Grassy Glide for sure, but that still, even though it takes 2 turns, still keeps the Dondozo very safe. And if this Ninetales is taken care of, how is Antonio easily breaking through this Dondozo, given that the rest of his Pokemon are all physical attackers and it's already got 1 stage of increased defense on its curse? That means it's actually able to do some significant damage with the Wave Crash as well. You could easily just go for a fake out and a Wave Crash into that Ninetales slot. That means you're not taking a Freeze Dry, and if something switches in, it's still taking a lot of damage.
And because of that threat, we are seeing the Ninetales going to be held for later on as the Dragonite comes in. That multi-scale is broken from the Grassy Glide that comes out there, followed up by a Kowtow Cleave doing some respectable damage into the Rillaboom, just above 50%, and a Yawn coming out from the Dondozo, now going to start that disruption. It's got the curse off, boosting up its stats, and now going to really disrupt Antonio's side of the field. The next turn, if this King Gambit doesn't switch out, it will fall asleep.
Yeah, and that means you won't be out doing any damage with the Kowtow Cleaves that's actually doing noticeable damage to that Rillaboom. It's easily going to be a 3-hit knockout, especially because the grassy terrain has disappeared from the field now. You could just switch into the Clefable to be able to soak up that Kowtow Cleave as well if it does want to stay in and accept the sleep. But it can easily just switch out into any Pokemon that's in the back, but nothing really wants to take a +1 Wave Crash here. Ninetales will definitely be in range of that attack. Garchomp will take some significant damage from it as well. And there's the Rillaboom switching out for Flavio as well. Going to be able to get that Clefable on the field for some redirection.
Yeah, it's a really nice switch. Not only going to be able to get that grassy terrain back later, which has dispersed now, but the Clefable coming in, going to be able to take those attacks from the Dragonite a little bit better. The King Gambit forced out. We talked about the Yawn there. Doesn't want to take that sleep turn. Garchomp entering the field, but does this open up the door for Dondozo to further disrupt or get another curse off or start the offensive? We are going to see a terrestrialization from Antonio's side of the field, finally locking in with that flying Terra type on the Dragonite, going to boost those flying type attacks that it has access to, but which slot will it be targeting into? Terra Blast here, it is going to be coming out from the Dragonite into the Clefable, but taken so well.
Yeah, that's not even going to knock it out in 2 hits, and there is that Wave Crash +1 boosted. That's so much damage into the Garchomp. Yes, you do get a bit of rough skin and the Wave Crash recoil, but that Garchomp, it's in range of 2 Life Orb ticks now.
That is so worth the recoil there, isn't it? And you know the damage, that's off 1 curse alone, so this must be quite an offensive Dondozo there, doing so much damage, nearly picking up what is quite a good defensive Pokemon in Garchomp. Not the best position for Antonio to be taking, and the Garchomp now in a position where it will outspeed everything on the field. It can go for that Earthquake as well. Now it has got the Dragonite next to it. The Flying type going to be immune to that and provide a little bit of damage, but the curse probably not going to be enough there to cut through the Dondozo right now. Will the double up though? You can't really do it with that redirection either, Jamie.
Yeah, and I think going for the terrestrialization on the Dragonite as well, yes, that's nice to be able to do some good damage with Terra Blast, but now you're neutral to the Wave Crash, and that would do still some very significant damage to the Dragonite. There is that Earthquake coming out from the Garchomp, going to be able to try and bypass the redirection from Clefable, but Clefable does smartly go for the Protect. You're still going to be able to do a nice chunk of damage to that opposing Well, I say nice chunk of damage. That wasn't really that nice chunk of damage, but every little bit does help. And there was the Terra Blast trying to pick up the knockout on that Clefable. If an Earthquake and Terra Blast double up had hit that Clefable, it would have been KO'd. But now here's the +1 Wave Crash once again. Look how much damage it is doing. But I think the crucial thing here is Wave Crash is giving recoil. There wasn't an easy way to break through the Dondozo, but it might actually be breaking through itself.
Yeah, and that's the thing. The Garchomp's probably got 1 more attack left before it goes down to that Life Orb recoil, and that is the problem. Can you get the most value out of that move? The Earthquake's the most probably obvious thing to click in here, but if that Rillaboom comes back onto the field, it's going to reduce the damage of that Earthquake by 50%, and you're not going to get the value that you need, and the Garchomp's going to just go down for a little bit of a whimper here. But that Dragonite does provide a threat. Can it take down this Dondozo if it's targeted into that this turn? If not, it probably will go down to a Wave Crash.
Yeah, we'll have to see. There's the Earthquake, and Rillaboom did just switch in. That means the Earthquake does do half damage. It brings the Dondozo Dondozo down into the red, though. Garchomp is going to go down to its own Life Orb recoil, but it might have just done enough damage here to put that Dondozo in range. Here's a Terra Blast coming out from the Dragonite into the Dondozo, and it's in the red. It's got +1 defense, but that is enough to be able to pick up the KO, and now that's the biggest damage dealer that Flavio had available left. It doesn't seem like he has too much damage available anymore.
Yeah, and I think you're preserving the Pokemon very well. You've got the Ninetales or that King Gambit to bring in now, which the King Gambit does threaten that remaining Clefable that you're looking at as probably one of the better options to deal with the Dragonite that's so low health. You do have a way to deal at least neutral damage with the Moonblast into it, but for your trouble, you're going to have to go for that Fake Out, double into it, and the Dragonite here has got the ability just to protect. The same with the Ninetales as well. The only Pokemon that doesn't have that protect that would be an obvious kind of Fake Out target this next turn would be the King Gambit here, but if you do that, you kind of leave that Dragonite open to go for whatever it wants.
I'm not really seeing how Flavio breaks through the King Gambit now. It's been left at full HP the entire game. If you go for your grass type attacks, that's resisted. If you go for a Moonblast, well, that could suddenly get a special attack drop, activating Defiant, and then suddenly King Gambit is knocking out both Pokemon in one shot. So I think that Antonio is really in the driving seat here. Yes, you do have Fake Out available on this turn. Yes, you can go for Redirection to keep one of the Pokemon safe, but I just don't see the damage anymore into this King Gambit.
No, I completely agree with you. It seems like a very uphill struggle as the players are deciding their final or their last remaining turns here. The Fake Out coming out into the King Gambit here, going to prevent it from moving this turn. Has the Clefable got enough to be able to take it, the Dragonite down, as we see an extreme speed into that Rillaboom. King Gambit flinching here, and the Moonblast coming out, but into that King Gambit, and with the Assault Vest, soaking that up so comfortably.
Yeah, that's just not going to do it. Maybe if it was a 2v1 of Rillaboom and Clefable just against King Gambit, but Rillaboom's being KO'd to another Terra Blast or maybe an extreme speed, it's not going to be able to break through this King Gambit very easily. So it seemed like the Dondozo was in a really good position, but I think the main thing was just Brave Crash did too much damage to itself. It was in a really good position with the +1 defense, but I think that probably like 70% of the damage to the Dondozo was just damage it did to itself.
Yeah, and the Rough Skin, like we said initially, when you're doing that much damage to the Garchomp, you don't mind it, but then after time when it's stacking up and you've got that double attack coming into it, it really does make such a difference for you to be able to take full advantage of it. You can see the offensive outlet that it's got, but I think you need something like the Clefable next to it to maybe draw in those attacks to kind of keep it a little bit safer. As we see the Terra Blast from this Dragonite into the Rillaboom, it is going to be enough to take it down, taking Flavio down to that last Pokemon, and the solo Clefable, is it got enough to take on the 3 on Antonio's side as the Iron Head is coming out. Going to be enough to lock it up. Antonio taking game 1.
We still got a tiny bit of information to there just at the end. King Gambit outsped the Clefable.
That is, yeah.
Like, Clefable is notably faster than King Gambit. That's got a reasonable amount of speed investment in the King Gambit, most likely. So even though the game was over, Antonio was about to win the game, we still got a little bit of information reveal at the end.
And it's probably more beneficial for Antonio as well in that position where you are Flavio, and that situation again playing out would have been better just to lock the forfeit in so you don't give that information away going into game 2, because now Antonio has a way easier time, more comfortable time going up against that Clefable, especially bringing the King Gambit in that situation, not only knowing how well it can take those Moonblasts, but the fact that you can just launch off a Iron Head and not have to really worry about it firing anything back or being supportive, or especially when you pair it with something that might be going a little bit slower than the King Gambit, where you can get rid of that Clefable if the redirection's there, and then you can concentrate on whatever's next to it.
I mean, Clefable is very good into Double Dragon, but now, yeah, if you can go for just an attack with your Dragon and also an Iron Head, that's probably a KO into Clefable, then you can't get the Moonblast anymore. So, yeah, very, very nicely done there from Antonio. It seemed like Dondozo was going to be in a really good position. It was maybe, well, if I KO the Ninetales, Freeze Dry's gone, I'm against 3 physical attackers, here's my curses. But then, yeah, it just... Wave Crash was really good damage, like, it did so much to the Garchomp and the Dragonite, but it did too much to itself.
Yeah, and you think as well, I think if you're Flavio, if you could get maybe one more curse up, you're probably picking up knockouts on those Pokemon, because if you knock out Garchomp in that situation, if you knock out the Dragonite in that situation, then the game becomes a lot easier after that, and then you can concentrate a few more of your side of the field, what you've got left, onto the King Gambit there that was forced out because of the yawn. It was full health and preserved so well by Antonio, which was going to be the closing up, and even then Antonio still had that Ninetales that was so well preserved from earlier on in the game that switched out at a really pivotal time, came in And you've got that freeze dry, even if things go wrong and the Dondozo does stick around.
Yeah, I think I'd like to see the Sneasler coming out from Flavio. It seems like it would be pretty impactful in this game. The King Gambit didn't seem like it was doing too much. Yes, the Swords Dance was nice, but then you were hitting into resisted hits into the King Gambit and Ninetales, and they were still able to survive. It's going to be a run back for Antonio there. Double Dragon coming out, Garchomp and Dragonite, but Flavio switching it up. Going to be leading immediately with this Dondozo. Head up with that Rillaboom. Yeah,
the Rillaboom coming out, it does enable the Dondozo to have a little bit of alleviation, especially against something like that Dragonite that could go for that Terrestrialization this turn, threaten with that Terra Blast or one of the other attacks that it's got. But the Garchomp in a position now where it's not going to be able to get maximum damage off onto the field. Obviously, the Rillaboom not affected by that Earthquake, and the Grassy Terrain now allows the Dondozo to either get a fake out into something like that Dragonite and then go for the Yawn. Not going to see that though, as we see the Rillaboom just preserved for later. The more preferable Pokemon coming in against this Double Dragon, which is that Fairy type in Clefable.
Yeah, Clefable's very good against the Dragonite and a Garchomp for sure, but it is a turn 1 Terrestrialization coming out from the Dragonite. Of course, you want access to your Flying Terra Blast to be able to do the most amount of damage you can, and then the Garchomp would also be able to do some significant damage here. The Dondozo has been left to be potentially targeted by both Pokemon because there was no fake out. That's a really good chunk of damage from the Dragon Claw from the Garchomp. Life Orb boosted, of course, and here's the Terra Blast coming out, but it was into what was the Rillaboom slot. Now they're switched in Clefable, and as we saw, doesn't quite pick up the 2-hit knockout, and there is that Dondozo setting itself up with that +1 attack and +1 defense with that Curse.
Yeah, it's got that 1 up already, and we've seen the damage that this +1 attack Dondozo can do from that game 1. It's going to able to do the same thing in this situation against Antonio. The one thing you would say, if you can preserve that Clefable well from Flavio's side of the field, it does have access to the move Life Dew, so it can heal up that Dondozo and get rid of that recoil, almost kind of supplementing the recoil that you're going to take. And the Garchomp already taking a little bit of chip already. Of course, it is being supplemented by the Grassy Terrain, which is restoring health each turn, but it has taken that tiny bit of chip. Can you get it in a position? Do you go for another Curse here, Jamie?
If you get another Curse, and then you've also got your Life Dew to recover that, you're not really breaking through the Dondozo very easily at all. There's no leftovers on this Dondozo. It has opted for the Covert Cloak instead. Leftovers would have been really nice here to get all that recovery. But yeah, if you can get a Life Dew off, then you basically sorted. But there was a lot of damage on that first turn. The Fable would be in range of a double up if you go for something like even an Earthquake in the Grassy Terrain, and also the Terra Blast that would be able to pick up the knockout. But here comes that Terrestrialization from the Dondozo here. It's going to be able to resist a Terra Blast, but it does now make itself weak to any of the ground type attacks. Of course, resisting Dragon as well, if that was the move of choice. But no, it's Stomping Tantrum, just very slightly weaker than Dragon Claw, but covering very nicely for that Terra Steel. Really, really good damage into that Dondozo. No Follow Me coming out, and it is a Terra Blast follow-up. Also into that Dondozo, and now it's the Steel type of +1 defense. It is able to survive. The Clefable did not go for Follow Me. It did instead go for that Life Dew. Now the Dondozo is going to be able to get a bit of recovery, as well as that Clefable. That might put it out of range of the double up from the Garchomp and the Dragonite as well. But here comes the Wave Crash into the Garchomp. Not enough for the knockout, and this is going to be so much recoil. This is the Rough Skin and also the Wave Crash recoil, and it seems like Dondozo just held on.
Just held on. Such a key turn there. You think the Life Dew was such a great move, because and then you thinking, okay, it's in a position where the next turn it can probably get another Wave Crash off, but not with that recoil, not with that Rough Skin damage. And the Garchomp in a position now where it probably can get an Earthquake off here. It doesn't have to worry about the redirection, and you can probably pick up the Dondozo even though that Earthquake is weakened, and then it frees up your Dragonite to get another Terra Blast off into the Clefable, start chipping things down on that side. And because Flavio's committed to that Terrestrialization as well, you're removing a key element of his team, not only the Dondozo, the offensive outlet there, but you're also getting rid of the option for Flavio to take advantage of one of the best mechanics that we've seen in the Pokemon franchise. The Earthquake coming out from the Garchomp, weakened by that Grassy Terrain, but no, it is enough to take down the Dondozo, and it will be felled this turn.
Yeah, and that was a Follow Me coming out from Clefable, which is now going to be useless because the Dondozo has been taken care of. The Garchomp is going to take some Life Orb recoil, but because the previous Grassy Terrain recovery was able to allow it to survive this turn, here's the follow-up of the Terra Blast into the Clefable, bringing it down into the red, and this could have been a Moonblast from the Clefable, but no, it went for that Follow Me instead.
Yeah, a little bit unfortunate there. You get the logic behind going for the Follow Me because you want to pull in that Stomping Tantrum. That would be the most obvious thing, but Antonio, knowing his calculations very very well known that the Dondo's are solo health. Even an Earthquake, when it has been weakened with the Life Orb boost that you've got on there, would be enough to pick it up. And now that Clefable in a really awkward position. We know the Rillaboom's in the back for Flavio, but what else do they have to take advantage of? And are they enough to get rid of these two Pokemon? The Dragonite hasn't taken any damage so far in this match, Jamie.
Yeah, that means it still has its multi-scale intact as well. And if you want to break it with the Rillaboom, well, that just allows Garchomp to just go for any attack to KO the Clefable here. Assumingly, it would be that Stomping Tantrum to be able to pick up the KO. It could also go for a Protect this turn, and that would allow a tiny bit more Grassy Terrain recovery, which would put it outside of Life Orb recall as well, but would probably still be in range of the Grassy Glide. The Dragonite's just still not threatened here, though. It's still able to knock out the Clefable with the Terra Blast, or even Extreme Speed at this point. And Terra Blast with the, into the Rillaboom would also be able to pick up the one-hit knockout. So do you just KO the Garchomp, but then now the Dragonite's able to do what it wants? Do you go for the Fake Out into the Dragonite to stop that Terra Blast? But then Garchomp can do whatever it wants. So it seems like Antonio is absolutely in the driving seat here.
Well, you wanted to see that Sneasler, Jamie, and here it is. It is making its way onto the field, kept in the back, getting that Grassy Seed activated under the Grassy Terrain, getting a defense boost, and activating that Unburden ability as well, which will put it faster than everything else on the field right now. We are just seeing the double protect from Antonio to get around the threat of the Fake Out, not wanting to take any unnecessary risks in this turn, as that Fake Out coming out into the Dragonite here to try and potentially break the multi-scale as well, which is still intact on that Dragonite.
Yeah, and you can now just safely go for the Grassy Glide KO into that opposing Garchomp, and the Sneasler would be in a pretty good position here. If it can spread some Diaclaw statuses, that would be lovely, but that's exactly what the Lumberry is for on the Dragonite. You can go for the Diaclaw, and yes, you might get one of the statuses, but no, you won't, because then the Lumberry will be activated, and then here's a follow-up Terra Blast. And there's not really much that Flavio can do. Rillaboom doesn't threaten Dragonite in the slightest. It has to be the Sneasler, and his best move is going to be the Diaclaw coming out here. The Terrasalization's already been used on that Dondozo going for Steel. You can't go for the Terrastella Acrobatics anymore. So Diaclaw would be nice. Yes, the Garchomp is now taken care of thanks to that Grassy Glide, and you get a little bit of Rough Skin recall on that Rillaboom as well. But even if you go for the Diaclaw, which would be your way out in this case, no, you don't have a way out because there is that Lumberry.
Well, here's the Diaclaw into the Dragonite. Does it get the status condition? It does not, and we are going to see in return a Terra Blast fired into that Sneasler. Has had the defense boost, but not going to be enough to take this powerful Terra Blast from the Dragonite, taking a key element from Flavio's team down.
It seemed like Antonio had pinned Flavio there pretty nicely. The Dragonite's just wasn't threatened. That Diaclaw, it did okay damage through the multi-scale, but now what are you going to do to break through this Dragonite now? Assumingly, like the King Gambit or the Ninetales is waiting in the back. Yes, there is the Ninetales. You can just go for a Blizzard, you can go for a Terra Blast, and that is going to be the game.
Yeah, unfortunately, so well managed from Antonio, but just not enough in the tank from Flavio, especially with that Dondozo. You feel like you just didn't get the value out of it when you got that curse up. Positioned the Clefable well, but just weren't able to get the damage required off. And this Dragonite has sat pretty healthy predominantly most of this game and really picking out most of the knockouts up from Flavio's side of the field. Clefable now in a situation where it is threatened, and we are going to see the forfeit locked in, and Antonio Sanchez taking round 3 here in the Dortmund Regional Championships.
Really, really nicely played from Antonio as well. It seemed like the consistent choice beats the anti-meta here. The Dondozo was really cool. I think it was a really cool tech.